A mum from Wallingford has joined a campaign against a new test that could be offered to pregnant mums to show if their baby has Down syndrome. It's going to be less invasive and more accurate than the one that's currently on offer by the NHS. Helen's middle daughter, Seren, has Down syndrome. She's urging the government to halt the new screening process, as there are fears that it could lead to more abortions. She says from the moment you're told you have an abnormal test result, you're bombarded with information that paints an unfairly negative picture of the condition.
The information is horrible because all the medical professionals, all the websites have to list every single eventuality, everything that could possibly happen to a child who has Down syndrome. And the reality is, if you were to be given that piece of paper and not know that it refers to a child with Down syndrome, actually those things can happen to any child. You know, children with Down syndrome are at a higher chance of getting certain health complications, but those are only things that neurotypical children can get too. I think life is a lottery. I have far more friends who have children with other disabilities, learning difficulties, autism, cancers, and none of their children have Down syndrome. So I think the targeting with the screening at the minute is hurtful to a lot of us who have children and we think, you know, why are our children valued so little compared to other children? And the reality is we've got to look at where society's going. It won't be long before they figure out where autism happens on which gene, and then we're going to start screening out children with autism just in case they're severe. It's a dangerous game. Because she was handed to me as a newborn, we've just developed together, and she's absolutely hysterical. She's got a great sense of humour. She can be naughty. She can be horrible to her sisters. She isn't any more loving. I was a bit disappointed about that because that's a great old stereotype that, you know, they're very, very... Well, she isn't very loving. In fact, her youngest sister is the loving one in our family. She's just Seren, you know. I think that the hardest thing for Seren is her speech, and people struggle to understand her. But her personality by far outweighs that. She's invited to birthday parties. She is a proper little character. She's very physically capable, which is unusual for a child with Down syndrome. And she just loves life. She really, really loves life.
That's Helen from Wallingford. Dr. Anne Mackey is the Director of Programmes for the UK National Screening Committee, which is recommending this new test to the government. Earlier she told me how the new test actually works.
The screening test for Down syndrome has been going on for a very long time, actually, and what we're proposing is a marked improvement to that test. It turns out there are tiny bits of the baby's DNA in the mother's blood from about 10 weeks of pregnancy. And you can take a blood sample and put it into a machine. It will multiply them by billions and then basically label them and weigh them. And in the case of Down syndrome, if there are too many chromosome 21s, too many copies of that chromosome, then the baby's very likely to have Down syndrome. And that result is reported to their parents.
Picking up on what our mum from Wallingford was saying, she says screening is hurtful. What would you say to that?
It is deliberately intended not to be. We are so careful to offer choice. This is completely down to the individuals and their partners and their families and the community. It is something that we can know during pregnancy, and therefore we let the parents know that. And the rest is entirely up to them.
Lynn Murray is the spokeswoman for Don't Screen Us Out. Lynn, just worth explaining what Don't Screen Us Out stand for?
Well, basically, when we heard that there was going to be an announcement regarding the new screening tests, rather than kind of take them as, you know, something really depressing, we decided to come out fighting. So we launched this campaign because we were pretty sure there was an announcement going to be made about rolling these tests out. So we asked people to visit the website don'tscreenusout.org.uk, where all our concerns regarding these new tests are clearly laid out. And the website guides people to write to their MP to express their concerns and their own personal stories about these new tests.
Isn't it, Lynn, a good idea to have all the information to make an informed decision? Isn't that a good thing?
It may well be, but that's not what happens anyway.
How do you mean?
Although Anne herself has said it's totally up to people, the thousands and thousands of stories of parents defy that. And Anne herself has said there's a number of questions about the use of it in a real life screening programme and things that the evidence hasn't yet been able to clarify. So we have, further concerns about that. We think it's time to stop and take stock of the screening system because, as Helen said, we will be going on to screen for more things, and we need to really start to get this right and decide whether this is the right thing to do, whether we should still be screening for people whose lives, the quality of their lives has improved so much in the last few years. So we just feel it's time for a review of the whole situation, and parents seem to have responded really well to.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and a difficult one. And as I was saying on the show earlier, when 15 years ago we obviously as the technology and scans and everything that were 15 years ago, we had a decision to make, and you go in with the odds of whatever it is, 1 in X, and then you come out with the odds and hopefully 1 in thousands and upon thousands, and you make a decision, don't you? Make a choice. And I still don't know to this day what we as a family would have done. But it's not just the child that you're thinking about there, the child that to be born with that might have Down syndrome. But what about other members of the family as well? Because it's not as simple as just saying it's a loving child. Sometimes it's very complicated, and family situations are very complicated. That's why having this choice surely has to be a good thing.
Well, I think you've nailed it there, because family situations are very complicated. You can't predict which of your children is going to be very complicated and which of them is going to be not complicated, and I doubt there's many that aren't complicated. I mean, I have a daughter with Down syndrome, and when she was born, I remember worrying about her future, and then realised that actually I had other children's future that equally to worry about. And I think that's when you get into that situation, you realise that actually they probably won't be the one that really maybe brings you the biggest problems. So
you had children already that didn't have Downs?
Yeah, and I think for me that gave a real perspective.
Were they old enough to have the discussion with? Did you speak to them about this?
Yeah, we did. I think, I was upset at first because I was like everyone else. I had this sort of probably stereotype in my head, and, my oldest daughter was crying with me, and then when she went to see her, she just said, "Oh, she's so cute," that person just becomes one. She is one of your family, You maybe don't want all that at the start, the complications that someone tells you about. But at the end of the day, it's another one of your own family, and that's how they took it, As I say, I was the one with hang-ups. They probably had less hang-ups than me because, they have then experienced it. And what I found with other children, that parents would try to explain to them after they'd visited us, and they just couldn't understand what they meant, if you know what I mean, because they were just like, "No, she's called Rachel," and they were trying to put this extra stuff on, and the kids couldn't handle it, and I was like, just leave them because they don't get it like us. We're the ones, our generation are the ones with the hang-ups, and I think that will change because at least people now are getting more into the mainstream of society.
Lynn, lovely to talk to you. Thank you. Lynn Murray, spokeswoman for Don't Screen Us Out.